and Commissioner Kathy Engelbert continue to stall, the uncertainty of a lockout is casting a long shadow over the most anticipated season in women's basketball history. Okay, the clock isn't just ticking, it's practically screaming. I agree with that. During a virtual negotiation session this past Monday, the WNBA delivered a stark ultimatum to the players' union. A deal
March 10th. That's the deadline. 24 days to save the most anticipated season in WNBA history. And if you think that's just another negotiating tactic, you haven't been paying attention to what's actually at stake here. Because while Angel Reese and Breanna Stewart are playing 3-on-3 in Dubai, Caitlin Clark is sitting at home waiting to find out if she'll even have teammates when training camp is supposed to start. The collective bargaining agreement talks have officially moved from uncomfortable to catastrophic.
With an expansion draft for 2 new teams on the horizon and a staggering 80% of the league's players currently sitting in free agency, the logistical nightmare of a delayed agreement would be catastrophic. Monday's meeting, which was forced into a virtual format due to a winter storm in New York, saw over 50 players join a 2-hour call that highlighted just how much work remains. Okay. And it's talking about the owners are not going to give in to this revenue sharing thing that these players continue to harp on. And it's just,
the numbers tell you everything you need to know about the chaos. 80% of WNBA players are currently free agents. 2 expansion teams need to conduct drafts. The college draft is scheduled. Training camps need to open, and the season opener is locked in for May 8th. That's not a negotiation timeline. That's a logistical nightmare with a countdown clock. Monday's virtual negotiation session brought 50 players onto a 2-hour call that was supposed to happen in New York, but got forced online because of a winter storm. And according to the Associated Press, that's when the league delivered their ultimatum. March 10th, or the schedule gets impacted.
EA and through the commissioner and however else you want to say that the NBA is not involved with the WNBA, you're just wrong. WNBA has a deadline now of March 10th. That is only right now 2 weeks away. And the deadline, according to the WNBA management, is that a collective bargaining agreement must be agreed to by that day, or the 2026 schedule will be impacted. This is a source going to ESPN.
Now here's where David Sampson's analysis becomes critical, because he's not just some talking head speculating about labor negotiations. This is a former MLB team president who's been on the management side of these exact conversations. And when he heard about the March 10th deadline, his first reaction was to smile, not because he thought it was funny, because he recognized it as weak. The WNBA told the players' union that if they don't have a deal by March 10th, the schedule might be impacted, might be shorter, might run longer. Sampson's response? That's not leverage, that's begging.
The WNBA Players Association couldn't be more correct. If you are going to set a deadline for a negotiation, this is how I was taught to set a deadline. You say to a person that if we don't have an agreement by March 10th, the deal that you are pondering for acceptance by March 10th, which may be given to you March 9th, March 8th, March 7th, maybe we already gave it to you with the housing increases, the minimum increases, but no revenue sharing movement. If you do not accept this deal by that day, every day following, our offer gets worse.
Here's how you actually set a deadline in professional sports negotiations. You don't tell the other side that missing the deadline will cause problems for everyone. You tell them that missing the deadline will cause problems for them specifically. Every single day they don't accept your offer, the next offer gets worse. That's leverage. That's how you force a decision. Sampson used this exact strategy when he was negotiating player contracts with the Marlins. You don't want to sign today? Fine. Tomorrow's offer is lower. The day after that? Even lower. And you have to mean it, because the second they realize you're bluffing, you've lost them forever. The WNBA didn't do that. They set an arbitrary deadline with vague consequences and no real punishment for missing it. That's negotiating scared.
That I agree with that. I agree. I don't know why the WNBA is playing soft with the WNBPA. So, like, put your foot down. Put your foot down. Give them, look, y'all got till March 10th to agree. Every day you don't agree, we going less and less and less and less. That's what they should do. Or if you don't agree by March 10th, it's a lockout. We moving on replacement players. I agree. I feel like the WNBA is being too soft with these ladies, with the WNBPA.
I love that strategy. I used it with players all the time. You don't want to agree right now? Your next offer is lower.
But there's a deeper problem here that nobody's talking about. The WNBA Players Association couldn't be more correct in their response to this deadline. Because if you're going to threaten consequences, you need to specify what those consequences actually are. What does impacted schedule mean? Does the season start late? Do they play fewer games? Do they compress the schedule and risk more injuries? The league won't say, and that vagueness is intentional, because the moment they commit to specific consequences, they're admitting those consequences will hurt them just as much as the players, maybe more. Think about what's really on the line here. The WNBA just came off a season where Caitlin Clark drove television ratings to levels the league had never seen. Attendance records fell in multiple cities. Merchandise sales exploded. Corporate sponsors who'd never looked twice at women's basketball were suddenly writing checks. And now they're threatening to delay or disrupt the one season where all that momentum could actually translate into sustainable growth?
That is the punishment for not doing things on my time. Yes, I know. I know. The level of selfishness that I exhibited, the level of intensity that I exhibited seems insane now, given what I do for a living and given what's happening to me personally. The fact that I would need to win every single tiny battle as a way to guarantee a winning of the war. The WNBA didn't go far enough. The WNBA should just come out and say, hey, we need a deal right now. Next deal, worse. Deal after that, worse.
Here's what makes this particularly insane. The expansion draft for the Golden State Valkyries and Toronto franchise can't happen until there's a CBA in place. Because how do you conduct an expansion draft when you don't know what the salary cap is? How do you protect players when you don't know what the roster rules are? Free agency is frozen. 80% of the league's players can't sign contracts because the contract terms don't exist yet. Teams can't make off-season moves. Coaches can't plan rotations. And Caitlin Clark, the player who single-handedly made casual sports fans care about the WNBA, is sitting in Indianapolis with no idea who's going to be on her team in 2 months. The article from the Associated Press made it clear, this isn't posturing anymore. With an expansion draft on the horizon and the vast majority of players in free agency limbo, the logistical nightmare of a delayed agreement would be catastrophic. Those aren't my words. That's their assessment.
Worse. Deal after that, worse. Just try me. Just try me that I'm not telling you the truth. But then you have to follow through. Because if your child, your partner, your parent, the people with whom you work, the people against whom you negotiate, the agents, if they all believe that you are not sincere when you give a deadline or an ultimatum, you've lost them forever. Is there a scenario where you could conduct a 2-team expansion draft, have free agency where 80% of the women are free agents currently, side note, have training camp, do the college draft, then start the regular season right now scheduled?
So what's actually holding up the deal? Revenue sharing. The players want a percentage of league revenue instead of fixed salaries. The owners are refusing, and both sides are dug in like this is a matter of principle instead of a business decision. The players look at the NBA and see a 50-50 revenue split. They see NBA players making generational wealth, while WNBA stars are flying commercial and working second jobs in the offseason. They want what they consider fair. The owners look at the balance sheets and see a league that's never turned a profit. They see the NBA subsidizing operations to the tune of millions of dollars every year. They see Caitlin Clark's impact as a one-time spike, not sustainable growth. And they're not willing to commit to revenue sharing when they're not convinced the revenue will actually be there in 3 years.
More pressure to the WNBPA. And I've seen it, shout out to y'all. It be a lot of y'all in the comments. I've been seeing say this for months now. Lessen the offer. Every time they send you a bogus response, offer them less. I've seen a lot of y'all in the comments saying this, man. Get down in the comments. Let me know what you think about this, man. Let's keep the vision.
Here's what makes the March 10th deadline particularly fascinating. It's exactly 2 months before the scheduled May 8th season opener. And Samson's question is the right one. Is there actually a scenario where you could conduct a 2-team expansion draft, run free agency with 80% of players available, hold training camps, execute the college draft, and then start the regular season on time if the CBA doesn't get signed until March 10th? The answer is technically yes, but it would require perfect execution with zero margin for error. One complication, one dispute over contract language, one team that needs extra time to make roster decisions, and the whole thing collapses. That's not a plan. That's hoping nothing goes wrong. And in professional sports, something always goes wrong. So why set the deadline there? Because the league is trying to create urgency without actually wielding the hammer. They want the players to feel pressure without the owners having to commit to the nuclear option of a lockout. It's negotiating from a position of weakness while trying to project strength. The players see right through it, and that's why they're not panicking. They know the league needs this season to happen just as much as they do, maybe more. Because if the WNBA cancels or delays the Caitlin Clark Revenge Tour season, they're not just losing ticket revenue. They're losing the entire cultural moment that made the league relevant to mainstream sports fans. Every day that passes without a deal, the pressure increases on both sides, but it increases faster on the league. Because they're the ones who set the arbitrary deadline. They're the ones who told the world, May 8th is opening night. They're the ones who sold tickets and negotiated broadcast contracts and promised sponsors that the product would be on the floor. The players didn't promise any of that. They can wait. The question is whether the owners can. And that's what makes this deadline so precarious. It's not just about getting a deal done. It's about who blinks first. Because whoever breaks from their position is going to be negotiating from weakness for the next decade. The players know that. The owners know that. And both sides are betting the other will crack before March 10th. But here's the thing nobody's saying out loud. This isn't really about revenue sharing, or salary caps, or contract terms. This is about power. The WNBA Players Association has never had leverage like this before. Caitlin Clark gave them that leverage, and they're not going to waste it by accepting the same type of deal they've always accepted. The owners, meanwhile, are terrified of setting a precedent, because if they give in to revenue sharing now, they're admitting that the league is actually profitable, or could be profitable. And that opens up questions they don't want to answer about where all the money has been going for the last 27 years. So we're stuck in a standoff where both sides have legitimate concerns, neither side trusts the other, and the deadline is racing toward us like a freight train. March 10th is 18 days away as of this recording, and based on Monday's 2-hour call that apparently resolved nothing, we're not close to a resolution. The bottom line is exactly what that article stated. Caitlin Clark's spotlight has brought the eyes of the world to the WNBA. That's not an exaggeration. International media is covering this league for the first time. Casual sports fans who couldn't name 3 WNBA players 2 years ago are now debating Rookie of the Year voting and playoff seeding. And the March 10th deadline will determine if those eyes have anything to watch come May. Because if this negotiation falls apart, if the season gets delayed or shortened or canceled entirely, you're not getting those fans back. They'll move on to the NBA playoffs and forget the WNBA exists. And all that momentum Caitlin Clark created will evaporate like it was never there. That's what's really at stake. Not just one season, the entire future viability of the league as a mainstream sports product. And both sides know it. The question is whether they care enough to actually compromise before it's too late. So what happens next? Realistically, we're probably headed for a last-minute deal. That's how these negotiations always work. Both sides will posture and threaten and leak stories to the media about how unreasonable the other side is being. And then, probably on March 9th or March 10th, they'll announce an agreement that both sides will claim as a victory, even though neither got everything they wanted. But there's a real possibility this goes differently, because the players have never had this much leverage before, and the owners have never had this much to lose. If either side miscalculates, if either side pushes too hard or refuses to budge on the wrong issue, we could actually see a work stoppage, a delayed season, or worst-case scenario, a canceled season. And if that happens, the blame won't fall equally. Fair or not, fans will blame whoever they perceive as being greedy or unreasonable. And in the court of public opinion, that's almost always going to be the owners, because the players are the product. The players are who fans pay to see. And if the owners are seen as preventing Caitlin Clark from playing basketball because they won't share revenue from a league that's supposedly losing money anyway, that's not a good look. The WNBA has a choice to make. They can dig in on their position, refuse to budge on revenue sharing, and risk losing the most important season in league history. Or they can recognize that sometimes you have to give ground to gain ground. That sometimes the smart business decision is accepting a deal you don't love, because the alternative is so much worse. March 10th is the deadline, but the real deadline is May 8th, because that's when the world expects to see Caitlin Clark back on the court. And if she's not there, if the season is delayed or disrupted or diminished in any way, the WNBA will have squandered the greatest opportunity it's ever had. The question is whether the people making these decisions understand that, or whether they're so focused on winning the negotiation that they lose sight of what actually matters. We're about to find out.